TOA community, welcome back to the channel, everybody. Robert Linkul, trainingtheolderadult.com. How are you? Hope you're doing well. I want to dive into talking about a position of the body and training of the body and different ways that we hold weights and different ways that we select the exercise and what that actually entails and is doing, okay? So what I mean is, what is bilateral and what is unilateral lifting? And then what are contralateral setups and what are ipsilateral setups, right? So that's a lot of laterals when you kind of look at all of this. I found a interesting website called Red Dragon Barbell. And in there, they had this very good article that kind of breaks this down and discusses each one of these and kind of gives you a little bit more detail, which I'm going to go through as well. But I wanted you to kind of see a written description of each one if you want to do that. And then a little bit blurry, but it gives you a pretty good idea or understanding of what targeted areas are being addressed through those lifting patterns. And then we'll also kind of dive into some examples of each one and give you some setups and some ways to kind of do that, on your own. All right. So first things first, let's talk about bilateral versus unilateral. I'm jumping all over the place here. Bilateral versus unilateral. Bilateral lifts include one implement or two that are being lifted at the same time with both feet or both hands engaged. So back squat, bars on your back, both arms are engaged, both legs are working at the same time, right? A front squat, a deadlift, a Romanian deadlift, stiff leg deadlift, a bench press, an overhead press, a pull up, a chin up, a pull over, barbell bicep curls, tricep push downs, anything where both arms same time or both legs same time are acting on an implement, okay, onto a load. A unilateral is one leg or one arm at a time. So if I'm doing a dumbbell curl, right arm finish, left arm finish, right arm finish, left arm finish, that would be a unilateral lift. But if I grab a barbell and I'm one implement at the same time, that would be bilateral. So here's a question for you. What do you call a dumbbell in each hand curling at the same time, but they're not connected, right? So I call it unibilateral, which is a made up word. Okay, most people would just call it bilateral. I get it. But in some cases, like when we're doing a pullover, if I'm laying on my back and I have one dumbbell, okay, that's bilateral. But then if I have one dumbbell and I'm only using one arm, that would be unilateral. So what if I have an implement in each hand and I'm doing my pullover, but they don't touch each other? This way they get to be independent and I can almost work each one on its own. Well, I am working each one on its own, but at the same time, that is what I nicknamed unibilateral. It's just a way of kind of defining a little bit more finite exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it, okay? And the reason for that is where I'm going with this. The reason that we would then, for your unilateral lifts, lunges, step-ups, a pistol squat, right? One leg, single leg squat, a single leg RDL, single leg Romanian deadlift, or a kickstand, rear leg elevated, also known as the Bulgarian, the single arm bench press or chest press, overhead presses, single arm pull-up. Okay, good luck with that one, okay? All those single leg, single arm implements and lifts are your unilaterals. So the purpose for that, right? If you, in the analogy that I like to give is that your body, let's look at and envision your entire body is all your muscles are like illuminating light bulbs. They can be dimmed or brightened, okay? So if I'm going to goblet front squat, okay? I've got a kettlebell or a dumbbell at heart height and I'm going to goblet squat, front squat it. As I'm holding that weight, just holding it at my heart height, what muscles are lit up more? Okay, everything is on. I'm standing with weight. Everything is on. So nothing's unilluminated, right? Everything is on. But which ones are brighter? Well, let's start with the simple ones. My arms, my biceps are definitely on. My anterior delts, my pecs are on. I'm having to support that weight. My triceps are on. Everything in my upper front half here is on to hold that weight in position. What else is on or a higher illumination? My lower back, my lumbar, because it's counterweighting. The weight's up in front of my body, So my counterweight, my lower lumbar, has to support that. So my lumbar, my QL, quadratus laborum, my erectors of my lower back, those are all lit up. And then as I go down into the squat, my quads are really, really lit up, and a little bit of glute will light up right at the bottom. And then as I stand up, my quads will kind of really illuminate and then come down, and really illuminate and then come down. Where my upper half is just on. It's just kind of like 80% the whole time, right? Where my quads are like 100%, 80%, 100%, 80% as I work through that range. Now, if I hold, let's do everything the same there that we just talked about. But if I hold a weight only in my right hand, nothing in my left, while I do that same squat, so a single arm racked squat, let's call it that, what happens now? Bicep still on, pec, deltoid, everything we just talked about, but is the other side on? Not as much, not nearly as much, okay? So what I just did was, in the world of asymmetries, I was thinking about this morning. When I brush my teeth, I notice this pattern. I go top left, 1, 2, top right, 1, 2, bottom left, 1, 2, bottom right, 1, 2, to the front, 1, 2. And then I do that same pattern over and over again as I'm brushing my teeth. Think about if you do patterns like that. When I turn on the left faucet, the right faucet, 1, 2 pumps, I wash my hands, I do my fingers, I rinse them off, 1, 2. Even the way I wipe my hands off on the towel, I do it the same way every time. Like, yes, that might be a little psycho, right? Like maybe I've got a little Jack Nicholson, what's that movie? As Good as It Gets. Maybe I got a little bit of that in me, right? But I think we all do these patterns like that through our life. And it's simple things like we'll almost always reach with our left hand to open a door because we're either holding something with our right or that's our coordinated arm. This is the way that we've been set up to open doors with our left hand, have our right hand available to do whatever it is that we're doing. That is very common, okay? If I drop something 9 times out of 10, I'm going to hinge and pick it up with my right hand. Why? I don't know. That's just the majority of the time. Unless it's set up for me awkwardly in positioning to do the left, it's almost always picked up with my right. If I had to get down on the floor, I'd almost always go down my right knee. Like these are patterns that our bodies repeat kind of autonomically. But in doing that, from the simplicities of brushing my teeth to picking weights up and down off the ground on one leg, those patterns create asymmetries in our bodies. So let's look at my QL and my erectors in my back. If you looked at them in illumination and development, one side, my left side's probably a little bit more illuminated and a little bit more developed than my right side, okay? And that's from years of throwing the hammer and years of being right-handed and years of taking my bag and putting it over my left to right shoulder, but not my right to left shoulder, right? So I'm left shoulder to right hip, It's those patterns, those carrying little bits of weight over and over and over again, years and distances, etc. So my left QL is more developed than my right QL. And let's call it a 60-40, okay? If I want to improve that in what we call seeking muscular equality, okay? Seeking muscular equality. I want to try to make it 50-50. Will I ever get there? Probably not, right? We do just too many things in our life to be like perfectly even on both sides, but let's get close. Let's do as best we can. To do that, I could do this single arm racked squat to hold on the right side. But as we talked about, if I hold with both hands up front, my lower back is the counter. Well, if I hold on my right side, where's my counter? My lower left QL, oblique, left flank, left trunk, right? So now I'm not only illuminating the front upper, but now the back lower left, right? My counter of forward and back has now gone at this angle across my body. So now the illumination is upper right to low cross back. And I have this X of illumination, this one side X of illumination that is on while I'm doing my squat. The lower body, pretty much the same in terms of illumination return. However, I'm now having to counter, because I'm holding on my right, I'm now having to counter more on my left leg to not fall over, right? My right leg's really got to work so I don't fall over. My left leg, okay, is probably going to have to work a little harder as well to try to counter me and keep me in position. So are my legs going to be evenly 50-50? No, I've got this overload on this side. So now I'm trying to seek equality between my legs to balance this weight while I'm squatting. So more than likely in that case, I'm going to overload my right leg because I'm holding the weight on my right arm. Not on purpose, but just that's how our body's kind of like, hey man, I got to counter this thing. I got to shift a little for balance. We're going to have that natural little shifty in there. Well, that's okay. You know why? Because in the world of throwing, in the world of everything else I've done, I've had my left leg forward 1,000,000,000 times compared to my right. So my right leg's a little bit weaker. That's all right. But what happens when I switch the weight to this hand? That whole story switches to the other side, right? So now I've got a weight in my left hand, thumbs up, got a weight in my left hand, and it's going to X now to my right QL, my right side of my body. So now we're looking at these equalities of musculatures and how we're asymmetric in our development, but also in our function. So you may squat really well holding that weight in your right hand, and when you put it in your left, it may feel foreign and goofy, and your hips are all shifty, and your knee pops out, and you're like, what happened? I went from looking super clean and tight and good range of motion, and then I put the weight over here. That's showing you not only a coordination, but there's some asymmetry and balance in your musculature to be able to hold weight on this side and then squat down and do that movement pattern. That this is something that you have not done a lot of, and your body is telling you, we're weak here. So that's something to work on. But if I always hold the weight in the center, my bilateral strength, I call it bilateral dominance, which means my dominant side or my dominant muscles are always going to kind of take over, even though I'm holding this weight in the middle, right down the pipe, and I'm like, I'm as even as I can be right now. But are you? If I had to look at those illuminations, I bet you after 5 or 6 reps, hey, right side, let me just do a little more. I'm a little better at this. I'm a little stronger. Left side, pipe down. You're weak, okay? Just let me take over. The adults are talking. You just chill out, right? And the little weak QL is like, but sir, I want to spot at the table. And the dominant QL is like, shut up. You go back to your room. Like, it's that kind of imbalance in here. I want that spot. I want to be equal in this musculature engagement. But our bodies just kind of like naturally default and just go, dude, I got it. Let me just do this. So how do we fix that? We use these asymmetries. We use these setups and positions where we hold the weights to help us bring that up. Come on up, get up here, get up to the table. Okay, now we're getting a little bit more even, but I'm gonna have to do that through a workload and variation, not only by selecting a lift that is one leg or one arm at a time, but just simply where I put it. And that's where the contralateral versus ipsilateral setups, right, can be really valuable. So what we just did was a bilateral lift, okay, a bilateral squat, holding a weight in the center. As soon as I went to one dumbbell, that just went to a unilateral load, okay, as I'm doing my bilateral squat down below. But if I drop my right foot behind me and I go into a lunge, like a racked lunge, then I'm now looking at which side, okay, do I want to load this from, and where am I going to consider the weight, okay? So let me give you this as an example here, and we'll kind of work with that picture. All right, so I'm gonna do a lunge, putting my right foot back. This is a unilateral lift, okay? One leg, both legs are working, but one leg is getting targeted more for quad stretch on the back and glute stretch, still quad work on the front leg, but mostly glute, okay? So I'm gonna come down in my split squat. There is my unilateral, one leg at a time, or one split stance training component at a time. But where I hold the weight now is gonna dictate if this is a contralateral or an ipsilateral setup. So contralateral is basically a opposite of stabilization. And as you see in the picture, let's see, right here, okay, where this gentleman is, he's got his right foot back and he's holding the weight in his right hand. So left counter to the weight in front, that's opposite. That's a contralateral setup. If I put my weight in the left hand, now I have the weight and my dominant forward leg on the same side. That's a ipsilateral, way over there, ipsilateral setup. Now, which one is better? It's up to the person and what the target of lifting is. What I will tell you is when you're stabilizing leg and the weight is on the same side, it's very difficult to balance. This is a little bit harder to balance in my opinion, because I have what's called the open the open side of this. There's nothing there for me to push against or counter against. So if I lose my balance that way, my right foot is so far back, it's really hard for me to balance. But by putting the weight on this side, I have the weight to counter, and my body kind of naturally shifts away and finds a little bit more equal balancing with that weight there. I can shift a natural counter to this contralateral setup that might feel more balanced for me versus having the weight and my front leg, ipsilateral setup. That balance component might be a little bit more challenging. Some people suggest the opposite. Some people feel with my left leg forward, if I put the weight in my left hand, I feel more balanced. What does that tell you? Does that mean they're wrong or they're doing something different? No. It means that somewhere in their musculature, whatever they've been doing in their lives, they've built up an ability to have their left leg forward and load bearing and feel stable. And that's good. That's awesome. But if they put it in their right hand, contralateral, do they fall over every time? Do they keep okay, that's showing us that this cross-sectional illumination, that X we were talking about, your X is not very strong, but your I, the one same side, absolutely is, okay? And what I mean by the I is like, if I'm left leg forward, holding in my left hand, that illumination on that left side, everything's on the left over there to light up, to stabilize that weight. But as soon as I put the weight in my right hand with my right foot back, well, now my cross section is on, okay? If I'm, sorry for the butt shot, but I want you to see this, everybody can see me. So if I'm holding the weight here, okay, I'm lit up from this shoulder across my back down to this glute. That's my countering cross-sectional, that's my X, right? And so when I'm ready to split squat or RDL or whatever I'm gonna do from here, that cross-sectional illumination is always on. If I relax, I tilt, so this guy goes, no, don't tilt, be tight, okay? So I'm illuminated over here. But if I put the weight onto this side, what just happened, right? I lost my X from this side, now I'm just eyed. This guy's on, this guy's on. This guy's on as a counter, absolutely, right? But not nearly as much because I have my left leg to support underneath it. Over here, I didn't. So all these are shifting mechanics, shifting of load to put you into different biomechanical positions that are not advantageous to you stabilizing the weight very efficiently, which is what we want, because then you have to work harder to stabilize that weight in the positions while you move it. So probably the easiest thing would just always to be bilaterally lifting. If we just always did these, right? If I always front squatted, back squatted, bench pressed with a bar, if I just always did both arms, both legs at the same time, I would always be in balance. I would never really have to worry too much about countering or tipping over or falling. I mean, there's always, I've got to balance the weight and counter it as I move it through a range of motion, but not nearly as much as a kickstand or a rear leg elevated split squat or a single leg RDL. These are really technical, very difficult lifts to do, right? And you're working more musculature in a harder movement pattern with more coordination demands, more stabilizing demands, more balancing demands, more IQ engagement, meaning I've really got to think about these movement patterns and the positions that I need to hold so I don't fall over. Now, all of this is in consideration of what are we lifting for? Am I trying to move maximal load and get as big as I can? Can I do that standing on one leg, holding one weight? I mean, how much weight can I hold in one hand? I don't know, 100 pounds maybe? And then what? On one leg, I have to do a single leg RDL with 100 pounds. How good of a technique is that going to be? That's going to be pretty rough. Now, if I'm doing it contralaterally, maybe a little better ipsilaterally, oh boy, this is really hard. So I can do a 100-pound single leg RDL once or twice and not hurt my back, great. But if I were doing a rack pull or a traditional Romanian deadlift, I could put 300-400 pounds on the bar. Well, now, hey man, I'm going to get a way better result now. I've just put triple or quadruple the weight, right? And I can move it through a better range of motion and I'm more stable. Well, now my hypertrophy effect is through the roof. That's what I wanted. Well, what if in the beginning I wanted to work on coordination and balance and stabilization and I'm a big fall risk? Can I get that from doing a bilateral lift? Yeah, but where do I get more of that? Contralateral or ipsilateral, unilateral lifts. One foot in front of the other, one foot up on a box, one down on the ground for my step ups, unilateral. Do I put my right foot with my right hand holding the weight, ipsilateral step-ups, or do I put it on my left hand with my right foot up on the box, contralateral step-ups, right? All of these are just challenging the way that our body is going to counter the weight where it is while we move through the desired range of motion. Just in this case now with the step-up, I'm on one leg, so there's a big balancing coordination to that. I'm moving up in spatial awareness, down in spatial awareness, and spatial recognition to where I'm at. I'm changing elevations. I'm moving that load through different heights. I'm having to coordinate that. Do I hold it left and left, or do I hold it left and right? Can I counter that? My cross X illumination versus my I illumination? If you think about your body lighting up throughout your entire workout, and at the end of the day, reflect back on that and go, did I illuminate everything pretty well at some point? Ideally, if you're doing 2 to 3 days of lifting a week, in each workout, you should have maximum illuminated every muscle group. That would be awesome, right? If we do a back squat, we could illuminate our quads and our glutes if we're squatting deep enough, okay? A lot of quad, but let's say quads and glutes. So if I were drawing with my daughters, right? I have an outline of my body. I could go in there and I could color in, like bright blue quads and glutes. All right, what's next? We're gonna bench press. Okay, well now I can color in my pecs and my triceps and my anterior delts. Okay, what's next? I wanna do kettlebell swings. Okay, I can color in my hamstrings and my calves a little bit, right? And my middle upper back. Okay, now what? Seated rows. Cool. I can color in my lats and my rhomboids and my posterior delt and my biceps a little bit. All right, now what? I want to do calf pumps, and I want to do shoulder raises, and I want to do curls, and I want to do tricep kickdowns. Okay, I can color in my calves, and I can color in my bis and my tris and my delts. Okay, what did I miss? Well, we didn't do a lot of trunk work. Well, I used my trunk on all of that stuff, so my abs were probably on the whole time. But when I was doing my RDLs, I held the weight in one hand and not in the other. Ooh, so now we had cross illumination this way, cross illumination that way. Oh, wow, that's all lit up, right? So you see how we can kind of go through and like color in our musculatures. Did we color in our whole picture? Yes. And how bright was each of those? Well, at some point, each muscle group, each muscle got 100% illumination. And then in doing so, how did I do in balance of asymmetry? Is my left pec visibly bigger than my right? Is my right bicep visibly bigger than my left? My forearms maybe, my calves maybe, my quads maybe. We had a lady that was a checker for like 30 years who would type the numbers with one hand and beep, scan with the other, beep, scan with the other. So which hand was more coordinated, do you think? This thing could just go on its own. She didn't even have to think. Which hand had more strength and more shoulder development? This arm, right? This arm was the one that was doing more physical labor. Which one had more limitations? This one had more injury, was more injury prone, but it was stronger, okay? The left shoulder was more, lost my camera. Left shoulder was more, we're still on? Yeah. Left shoulder was definitely more prone to injury, okay? Because it was weak, because it didn't have a lot of strength to it, but it was more coordinated. So you can see advantages, disadvantages to the simplicities of things that we do throughout our day. Literally where you carry your purse or your briefcase or how you put on your backpack, okay? Try putting your backpack on backwards. When I put on a backpack, it goes on my right shoulder and then my left arm goes through. Try doing it the other way. Put it on your left and try to get your right arm. It'll feel goofy as shit. It's just because the pattern that you're used to doing and your flexibility has then adapted to that, and your coordination to do both of those on a regular is not very high. So it just looks silly when you're trying to do it the opposite, because we've learned that pattern. We've built that mobility. We've built that strength in the same pattern over and over and over again. I hope this helps in trying to kind of define a little bit of how unilateral versus a bilateral, one leg versus both legs, right? Or one arm versus both arms. Then in an ipsilateral, same side load versus a contralateral, opposite load variation, how we can start to fill in some of these imbalances, seek muscular quality as we talked about, because of all the things that we do in kind of our natural everyday movements and patterns and abilities. Think about those coordinated drills, brushing your teeth, how you comb your hair, how you wash your hands, how you open doors, how you get in and out of bed, in and out of your car, how you put on your backpack, how you tie your shoes. Do you always do your left foot and then your right, or vice versa? Do you ever hinge forward and tie them on the ground, or do you always bring them up to your lap, right? All of these little patterns, they define what we do, how we do it throughout our day, and then our abilities that will then reflect. And if you can look at your body and see, what am I illuminating, and am I illuminating everything as properly as I could? Maybe I need to make some changes. Maybe there's some weak areas. We all have weaknesses. We all have areas that we need to target. But if you think about the illumination component to this, it just gives you a visual. Man, I don't really illuminate my lower body on the backside much at all. I need more hamstrings, and I need more calves, and I need more glutes. And just don't train that all that often. If you don't think about it that way, you may never recognize where your weaknesses are. Train that full body, illuminate everything, 2 to 3 days a week. I think you'll feel great success. Contralateral versus ipsilateral, okay? Contralateral versus ipsilateral. And changing the hand positions and where you hold your weights, you can find some really challenging components to that just from simply putting the weight in your other hand. Wow, this split squat's way harder because I'm holding my 30 pounds over here versus over here. But if I did 15 in each hand, piece of cake, right? Additional challenges to this. All of this trains you to be more stable, more coordinated, more balanced, less fall-provoking, weakness in the body. Better strength and stability overall. All right, gang, that's enough from me. I hope you enjoyed this. Comments, questions, feel free to hit me up down below. If not, continue to fight your good fight against sarcopenia. We'll see you in the next video. Take care.